So we get two outright amazing episodes of Amphibia this week. The second temple, which focuses on Anne, and Barrow's Warhammer, which focuses on Sasha. And these two episodes very nicely parallel each other. Anne and Sasha embark on dangerous quests to unforgiving climates. Anne must go to the tundra, while Sasha must go to this dark, swampy wasteland and face a giant worm that wants to try and kill her. And time again, they must make choices that determine where their priorities really lie. And Anne constantly chooses to sacrifice her own wants and desires for the benefit of other people, and because of this, she benefits. Because of this, she succeeds in getting the gem charged, but only partially, and this is really interesting. She still retains some of the gem power in her eyes, and the gem flickers, demonstrating its instability. This is going to have consequences later. I don't think I'm going to blow anyone's mind by saying this, but what exactly will those consequences be? Well, I think that very much is going to be determined by what actually happens in our season finale, True Colors. Anne wants to return home. She wants to use the gems to take herself and her friends back home using the Calamity Box. But if one of the gems isn't fully charged, perhaps this won't work, and her attempts to return home will fail. However, for her to fail at this, she would first need to gather the 3 gems, gather her friends together, and have nothing bad happen to them. And to be quite frank, I don't think this is particularly likely. There are a few reasons for this. One is the meta-structural reason, which is that we still have at least one more full season of the show to go, so it's not like everything is going to be resolved at the end of season 2. And it's also not going to be like, oh, everything else goes right, but she has to go back to the temple and recharge the gem. That would take like 5 seconds of screen time. There's not a lot of conflict there. It's going to need to be something more than that to drive the 3rd season of the show. Something bad is going to happen. So, there are, of course, plot-related reasons, too, why it doesn't look like Anne's quest to get the gems and return home is going to be that easy. I'm still torn about the Marcy betrayal theory. There are times when I think it is very astute and accurate, especially considering what we know about Marcy. From the flashbacks, in which she looks pretty smug, and I think it's significant that we saw that flashback to Marcy again this episode, so we remember what she was like back then. It's also very telling that she appears in this huge shadowed form with the music box in the intro for season 2. Either that's the world's biggest red herring or something is going to happen with Marcy. That said, Marcy has given us no reason to think that she's villainous. Of course, she doesn't have to be villainous necessarily. She could just be misguided or manipulated. But if it's more than that, if Marcy does want to stay in Amphibia, as a lot of people have very reasonably argued, then I'm kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm kind of waiting for even the slightest indication that she would rather stay in Amphibia, and we have not received that as of yet. Now, if Marcy says or implies anything that could possibly make me believe that she doesn't want to return home, then I will fully buy into this theory, but until then, I'm a little skeptical. But even if Marcy is exactly as sweet and innocent as Anne and a lot of us fans think she is, there is still the problem of the king, who does in fact have nefarious intentions. I don't think any of us would doubt that at this point. He wants to serve his bugmaster, and somehow the three girls collecting the gems allows him to do this. How? I'm not really sure. Perhaps he wants to use the music box for his own purposes and travel to other worlds. But whatever his plans, they are probably going to be sabotaged somewhat if he can't use the music box because one of the gems is not fully charged. So Anne might end up benefiting from the gems not being charged in the season finale. Now, on one hand, this does seem a little cheap. It's not like she made the conscious choice to save a little bit of the gem power for herself. It's just an accident. But it doesn't feel entirely cheap to me because it is an accident that speaks very much to who she is as a character. And especially to her selflessness and her desire to help other people, which this episode demonstrates thoroughly. She only doesn't end up charging the gem all the way because she fears that her friends are in danger. Now, this does not end up being the case, but that is her rationale. She is trying to help those around her, and because of that, she might end up benefiting from the gem not being fully charged. We'll have to see. Of the three friends, Anne is the only one who cares more about those around her than she does about herself and her immediate objective. That's kind of a hot take, so I'll explain. For Sasha, I think the case is pretty obvious, as we saw in the fantastic episode Barrel's Warhammer, which is easily one of the best episodes of this entire show. Sasha is determined to get this hammer. Otherwise, she's just a nobody, a fugitive, and someone who's probably going to be thrown in jail by the Toads. With the hammer, she's powerful. She's the leader of the Toad army. So, she's so committed to getting the hammer that she's willing to sacrifice the well-being of Percy. Those other Toads don't quite matter as much to her. It's not like she doesn't care about them. She does. It's just other things take precedence. And honestly, the same is true for Marcy, as we saw in the first temple. I believe Marcy's willingness to get so absorbed in something that she forgets the effects her actions have on her friends is going to come back later. She was so absorbed by those puzzles that she didn't pay any attention to the harm she was unintentionally causing her friends. Anne, however, is sacrificial. She's willing to give her thick caterpillar wool parka to the bird that's attacking her friends, even though doing so will mean she's no longer able to keep warm. She puts herself in danger later in order to, she believes, save someone from an avalanche. And speaking as someone who comes from an area where there are a lot of avalanches, that's no joke. That's really dangerous, and Anne is really sacrificing a lot there. And at the end, she proves herself willing to face herself. She proves herself willing to take responsibility. The music box is something she stole. I mean, sure, she was kind of badgered into it by others, but she still stole it herself. And she has to face that without any lies or chicanery. As Anne is told by the end of this episode, empathy is very important, but so is the willingness to take responsibility for your own actions. And Anne demonstrates that she is willing to do this by the end of the episode. So based on how Anne has consistently proved herself worthy throughout the episode, her benefiting from the gem not being fully charged wouldn't be entirely cheap, because it would indeed fit her character. It would indeed fit her desire to put her friends above herself. This is in sharp contrast to Sasha. The decision to pair these two episodes together was brilliant on the part of the writers. This is basically a 22-minute episode in everything but name. I can easily imagine a version of these two episodes that is just one episode, with them cutting back and forth between Sasha and Anne. The two episodes are very nicely paralleled. It's not like sometimes when you have one very serious episode and one very silly episode, so they make kind of a strange pair. Here, they're basically two halves of the same story. They're two characters responding to the same basic conundrum, which is, what do you do when you have to choose between a grand objective that you really want and possibly causing harm to those around you? For Anne, the answer is very simple. She sides with her friends. That's it. No questions asked. For Sasha, it's a little more complicated, and that's what makes her character great. Internal conflict makes the most engaging stories, and a character who always does what is right without really having to confront this vast inner struggle is not as interesting to me as a character who is more conflicted and confused and who doesn't always have a definite idea of what is right. Sasha is trying to be honest to Percy. She does believe what she says when she says that she'll deliver them all from danger if circumstances turn unfortunate and deadly, but when push comes to shove and she has to make her choice, she chooses to pursue the Warhammer and this grand objective instead of helping out Percy. Now, I could say that we're not quite being fair to Sasha here. Anne basically wins by losing, just like Marcy did in the first temple. She wins the challenge the moment she stops trying to win it. For Sasha, losing would mean, at best, staying a fugitive and possibly being arrested, and at worst, being eaten by a giant monster. I don't necessarily blame her for making the choices she did. But Sasha herself is obviously hurt by the choices she made. She's basically fueled by resentment and rage this entire episode. We see her eyes glow for the first time. She feels that she's on the outs in her friendship with Anne and Marcy. She was afraid this would happen since the end of season 1, and she knows that Anne has now sided with Utopia and Marcy, and that she, Sasha, is opposed to them. She's on the outside now. And she feels really lonely and isolated, and she acts out in resentment. And what does this get her? She loses her toad friends just like she lost her human friends. She's very alone now. Perhaps this will make her repent and join Anne, just like we saw in the trailer when she appears to be surrendering. And perhaps the two of them will ultimately benefit from Anne's gem only being half charged because of what we see at the end of the second temple. We'll have to wait and see. So thank y'all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. Keep watching Amphibia. If you can't tell, I really like these episodes. Sasha episodes are always the best. Let's be honest here. And because of that, it's kind of unfortunate how sparsely we see her character. I think someone pointed out that we haven't seen her in like 9 months, but it's nice to have her back. I might make a video on Barbaulds Warhammer in the future. We'll have to see how it goes. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. I promise you that. Thank y'all again. Adios, comrades.